What would you do if your own family asked you to step aside and hand your future to someone else? Amara Johnson lost the wealthy fiancé not because she failed, but because her younger sister wanted his name, his money, and his world. So Amara was sent away to marry a poor farmer in Texas instead. Everyone thought that was the end of her story, a quiet sacrifice, a smaller life. But the man waiting for her there was not what anyone believed, and before long the truth would shame every person who had ever looked down on him forever. The Johnson family lived in a polished brick house in Houston, in the kind of neighborhood where image mattered almost as much as money. The lawn was trimmed. The silver stayed bright. The family photos looked perfect. From the outside, nothing seemed broken. Inside, the cracks had been there for years. They began the day Celeste Johnson died. Before she passed, Celeste left her husband with two promises. One was born from gratitude, the other from old ambition. Years earlier, when Marcus Johnson's business nearly collapsed, a ranching family in Texas had helped them quietly. Around the same time, the Whitmores of River Oaks had opened social doors Marcus could never have forced open alone. Celeste never forgot either debt. She told her husband that one day, if the future allowed it, one daughter should be joined to the Cole family in Texas, and the other could be matched into the Whitmore world. To her, both paths held value. One promised character, the other promised access. After she died, the promises stayed alive longer than her warmth did. Amara Johnson learned how to live quietly after that. At 32, she had become the steady center of a family that rarely thanked her for holding. She was thoughtful, dark-skinned, self-controlled, and slow to speak when she was hurt. She worked hard, handled problems before they grew, and kept peace even when peace cost her something. Vanessa Johnson, at 29, was her opposite in almost every visible way. Quick where Amara was measured, stylish where Amara was simple, restless where Amara was grounded. Vanessa liked luxury, attention, and the feeling of being chosen first. She did not want a decent life. She wanted the kind of life people envied. That Thursday evening, Marcus called Amara into his study. The room smelled faintly of leather and old paper. The blinds were half closed. He sat behind his heavy desk, looking more tired than usual. "You remember your mother's wishes," he said. Amara closed the door behind her. "Yes," Marcus folded his hands. "I've decided it is time to honor them." Her chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I have spoken to both families. The Cole family in Texas is still willing. And the Whitmores are open to a formal introduction with marriage in mind." Amara stood still. "Which daughter for which family?" Marcus looked at her directly. "You will go to Texas." For a second, Amara only stared at him. Not because she had been dreaming of River Oaks, but because her father had once made it sound certain that Vanessa would never accept a quiet life in the country. Before Amara could answer, the study door opened. Vanessa walked in without knocking. "Why am I being discussed behind closed doors?" Marcus frowned. "I told you to wait." "And I decided not to." Her eyes moved from him to Amara. "What is this?" Marcus straightened in his chair. "Sit down. I'm fine standing." "Then listen," he said. "Amara will marry Ethan Cole in Texas. You will be introduced to Ryan Whitmore." The room went still. Vanessa blinked. "Ryan Whitmore?" Marcus did not repeat himself. "The Ryan Whitmore from River Oaks?" "Yes." She turned slowly toward Amara. Her surprise lasted only a moment. After that came something uglier. "You were going to give her that life?" Marcus's voice hardened. "Watch your tone." Vanessa ignored him. "You were really going to send me to a farm in Texas while she marries into River Oaks?" "The Cole family is respectable," Marcus said. Vanessa gave a dry laugh. "Respectable is what people say when they mean poor." Amara kept her face calm. "You don't even know Ethan Cole." "I don't need to. I know Ryan Whitmore." Vanessa folded her arms. "And I know exactly what that name means in this city." She was right. The Whitmores were everything she admired: old money, private schools, charity galas, country clubs. Ryan Whitmore was not just a man to Vanessa, he was entry, proof. A shortcut to the world she had always wanted, and now she had just learned that door had almost been opened for Amara. "She doesn't fit there," Vanessa said flatly. Marcus stood. "Enough. No, not enough." Vanessa pointed at her sister. "She doesn't want that life. She would waste it." Amara's voice stayed low. "This is not about what I deserve." Vanessa snapped back. "It is exactly about that." Marcus slammed a hand against the desk. "Both of you stop." But Vanessa was beyond stopping. "Dad, be serious." Amara belongs somewhere quiet, somewhere small, somewhere people don't notice her. That farm is perfect for her. Me, I belong with people who matter. Silence followed that. Amara looked at her father, not her sister. Why did you call me first? Marcus hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. He had hoped to settle it privately before Vanessa found out. Vanessa saw it too. No, she said. This is wrong. The decision has been made, Marcus replied. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Then she looked at Amara again, and the envy in her face was so open it felt hot. You are not going to get a better life than me, not by accident. Not because Mom left behind old promises. Vanessa, Amara said quietly, don't do this. But Vanessa's eyes had already changed. Cold, focused, dangerous. She turned back to Marcus. Fix it. Marcus did not move. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. I mean it. Fix it now, or I will. In that moment, Amara stopped thinking about marriage. She started thinking about what her sister might do to get her way. The silence after Vanessa's last words felt heavier than any argument. Marcus Johnson stood behind his desk, his hands pressed flat against the wood as if he needed something solid to keep control, but control was already slipping. Vanessa had never been the kind of person who accepted losing, not quietly, not gracefully, and certainly not when something she wanted was within reach. Fix it, she repeated, her voice calmer now, but far more dangerous. Marcus exhaled slowly. This is not how decisions are made in this house. Vanessa let out a short, humorless laugh. That's funny, because it seems like every decision in this house has always been made without me. That's not true, he said sharply. Isn't it? She shot back. Or do you just forget when it's convenient? Amara stayed where she was, watching the two of them. She knew that tone. Vanessa wasn't arguing anymore. She was building towards something. And then Vanessa turned her attention back to her. You really think you're the better choice? She asked quietly. Amara didn't answer. Vanessa took a step closer. Let's talk about that. Vanessa, Marcus warned, his voice tightening, but she ignored him. Tell him, Vanessa said, looking directly at Amara. Go on, tell him what kind of wife you'd be. Amara's chest tightened, but her face remained composed. This isn't necessary. Oh, it's necessary, Vanessa replied, especially if we are pretending she deserves a life like that. Marcus's voice dropped. That's enough. No, Vanessa said firmly. Not yet. Then she said it. Tell them you can't have children. The words landed like something heavy and irreversible. Marcus's head snapped toward her. Vanessa, but it was already out. The room fell into a suffocating stillness. Amara didn't move. For a moment she didn't even breathe. That part of her life was something she carried quietly, something she had never used as an excuse or a shield. It was her pain, and she had learned to hold it without letting it define her. Vanessa had just turned it into a weapon. Say it, Vanessa pressed. Or do you want me to explain? Stop, Marcus said sharply. But Vanessa didn't stop. Years ago, she began, her voice almost conversational now. I had a medical emergency. Do you remember that night, Dad? Marcus's jaw tightened. She rushed me to the hospital, Vanessa continued, nodding toward Amara. She didn't think, she didn't wait, she just acted. Amara closed her eyes briefly. She remembered everything, the late night, the panic, the way Vanessa had collapsed, the drive that felt endless. The moment doctors pulled her away, asking questions she couldn't fully answer, the pain she ignored in her own body because nothing mattered except getting her sister help. She stayed with me, Vanessa said. Even when she was already in pain herself. Marcus's voice was low. Vanessa, that's enough. No, it's not, Vanessa replied, because that's not the whole story. She looked directly at her father. She didn't get checked in time. She ignored her own condition, and because of that, Vanessa paused, letting the silence stretch. She lost the ability to have children. The truth filled the room. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief second. Amara stood still, her hands at her sides, her expression controlled but distant. Vanessa turned back to her, her voice sharper now. So tell me, Dad, how exactly is she supposed to marry into a family like the Whitmores? What are they going to say when they find out she can't give them heirs? Enough, Marcus snapped louder this time. But the damage was already done. Vanessa crossed her arms. I'm just being realistic. Amara finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. You're being cruel. Vanessa tilted her head. I'm being honest. Marcus ran a hand over his face. This is not how we discuss family matters. Vanessa stepped closer to him now, her expression shifting again. The anger softened, replaced by something more calculated. I'm your daughter too, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound vulnerable. Why does it always feel like I'm the one being overlooked? Marcus looked at her, conflicted. You're not overlooked, he said. Then why am I being sent away? She pressed. Why am I being given the smaller life? You don't understand what you're saying, Marcus replied. No, Vanessa said, shaking her head. I understand perfectly. You're giving her something she can't even fully complete. The implication hung in the air. Amara didn't react outwardly, but something inside her shifted. Vanessa stepped back, her voice rising again, emotion now spilling over. You're asking me to give up everything I've worked for, everything I've dreamed about for what? For fairness? This is not about fairness, Marcus said, though his voice lacked certainty. It should be, Vanessa shot back. Then, without warning, she grabbed a small decorative object from the shelf behind her, a glass paperweight, and slammed it against the edge of the desk. It shattered. Before either of them could react, she picked up a jagged piece. Vanessa, Marcus shouted. Change it, she said, holding the sharp edge against her palm. Or I will make sure you regret it. Put that down, he ordered, his voice shaking now. No, she said, her eyes locked on his. Not until you fix this. The room felt like it was closing in. Marcus took a step forward. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking better than either of you, Vanessa replied. I know what I deserve. Amara watched quietly. She knew, in that moment, that the decision had already been made. Not because Vanessa was right, but because Marcus would not risk losing her. Stop, Amara said softly. Both of them turned to her. She looked at her father. It's fine, Marcus frowned. Amara. I'll go to Texas, she said calmly. Vanessa didn't lower the glass, but her eyes flickered with victory. You don't have to do this, Marcus said. Amara met his gaze. Yes, I do. There was no anger in her voice. No bitterness. Just a quiet certainty that made it harder to argue with her than any shouting could. She turned slightly toward Vanessa. For some people, she said gently, taking something once is never enough. They keep taking until there's nothing left to take. Vanessa didn't respond. She didn't need to. Amara already understood. She turned and walked out of the room. No one followed her. No one called her back. Later that night, she packed her belongings in silence. Every movement was careful, deliberate. Not rushed, not chaotic, just quiet acceptance. Downstairs, the house returned to normal as if nothing had happened. No apology came, no one knocked on her door. And by morning, she would be leaving Houston alone. Morning came too quietly. There was no real goodbye in the Johnson house. No long conversations, no second thoughts. Just the sound of a suitcase being zipped, footsteps on the stairs, and a door opening into a day that felt heavier than it should. Amara stood at the front entrance for a brief moment, her hand resting lightly on the handle of her suitcase. The house behind her looked exactly the same as it always had, perfect, composed, untouched. Nothing about it reflected what had happened the night before. Marcus was already in the dining room, reading something he clearly wasn't absorbing. He didn't look up when she stepped inside. I arranged a car, he said without meeting her eyes. It will take you as far as it can, not all the way. Amara nodded, even though he didn't see it. Thank you. Vanessa wasn't there. Whether she was still asleep or simply chose not to come down, Amara didn't ask. She picked up her suitcase again. For a moment she thought her father might say something more, something that sounded like regret, or at least acknowledgement, but he didn't. So she opened the door and stepped outside. The morning air in Houston was warm, already carrying the promise of heat. The car was waiting at the curb. The driver nodded politely, took her suitcase and placed it in the trunk. That was it. No one came out. No one called her name. The door behind her closed, and with it, everything that had ever been familiar. The city faded slowly. At first it was just the usual movement, traffic lights, glass buildings, people heading into their routines. Houston looked exactly the way it always did, busy, confident, alive. Amara watched it through the window, her reflection faint against the glass. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't sad, but because something in her had already gone quiet. The car moved farther out, past the crowded roads into wider highways. The buildings thinned, the noise softened, the distance between places grew longer. The driver didn't speak much, and Amara didn't try to fill the silence. She leaned her head slightly against the window. This was real. There was no turning back. The scenery changed in ways that were impossible to ignore. Concrete gave way to open space. The skyline disappeared, replaced by long stretches of road that seemed to go on without interruption. Gas stations appeared less frequently. The trees grew shorter, rougher, dry bushes scattered across the land. The air outside looked heavier, thicker. The farther they drove, the more the world seemed to slow down. Amara watched it all without really focusing. Her thoughts moved differently now, not fast, not sharp, just steady. She thought about her mother. About the way Celeste Johnson used to speak softly, even when the world around her was complicated. About how she believed in balance, how one promise could carry as much weight as another, even if they led to very different lives. Would she have allowed this? Amara didn't know. Or maybe she did. Maybe her mother would have asked her to endure, just a little longer. That had always been the pattern. Endure, adjust, accept. Amara closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't hate the idea of a simple life. She didn't hate the thought of living somewhere quiet, somewhere removed from expectations and comparisons. What hurt wasn't the destination, it was the reason she was being sent there. Not as a choice, not as an opportunity, but as something that could be traded. Something that could be moved aside. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The road stretched endlessly ahead. Eventually, the driver cleared his throat slightly. "Ma'am, the main road ends a few miles ahead. The rest is not really suitable for this car." Amara opened her eyes. "That's fine." He slowed the vehicle as the pavement gave way to a rougher path. Dust lifted into the air behind them. The car stopped. "This is as far as I can go," he said apologetically. Amara nodded. "Thank you." He stepped out, opened the trunk, and handed her the suitcase. The road ahead wasn't really a road anymore. It was uneven, narrow, and clearly not designed for comfort. She looked forward, then back once. The car, the driver, the direction she had come from, it all felt distant already. She adjusted her grip on the suitcase. "It's not far," the driver said, though he didn't sound certain. Amara gave a small, polite smile. "I'll be fine." He hesitated as if he wanted to say more, but then simply nodded and returned to the car. A moment later he was gone. And she was alone. The silence was different here, not empty, just wide. Amara started walking. The ground was uneven, forcing her to slow down. The wheels of her suitcase caught against the dirt and small stones, making each step a little harder than the last. The heat pressed down gently but steadily. There were no buildings in sight. No voices, no reminders of where she had come from, just open land. She paused once, shifting the weight of the suitcase, her hand tightening around the handle. A thought surfaced quietly. Was this exile? Was this what it felt like to be removed from one life and placed into another without being asked? She let out a slow breath. "No," she murmured softly. Because exile implied rejection from a place that wanted you, and she wasn't sure Houston had wanted her for a long time. She kept walking, step by step, not rushing, not stopping, just moving forward. Eventually, the outline of a house appeared in the distance, simple, modest, real. Amara slowed slightly. This was it. This was where her new life began. Before she could take another step, a voice called out gently, "Amara?" She looked up. An older woman stood a few yards ahead, her posture relaxed, her expression warm but not intrusive. There was no judgment in her eyes, no curiosity that felt invasive, just quiet recognition. Amara straightened slightly, still holding onto her suitcase. "Yes," she answered. The woman smiled softly. "I've been waiting for you." The woman standing in front of Amara did not look like someone waiting to judge her. She looked calm. There was something steady in the way she stood, something grounded in the way her eyes rested on Amara without rushing, without searching for flaws. "I've been waiting for you," she said again, her voice warm but gentle. Amara adjusted her grip on the suitcase. "I'm sorry if I'm late." "You're not late," the woman replied with a soft smile. "You arrived when you were supposed to." That answer stayed with Amara longer than it should have. The woman stepped closer and reached for the suitcase. "Let me help you with that." "Oh no, I can carry it," Amara said quickly. "I know you can," the woman said. "But you don't have to do everything alone the moment you arrive." There was no insistence in her tone, just quiet certainty. After a brief hesitation, Amara let go of the handle. The woman took it with ease. "I'm Margaret Cole," she said, "Ethan's mother." Amara nodded slightly. "I'm Amara Johnson." "I know," Margaret said gently. The house was smaller than Amara expected. Not poor, just simple. The wood on the porch was worn but clean. The windows were clear, letting in soft light. There were potted plants near the entrance, not decorative in a showy way, but cared for in a way that felt personal. When Margaret opened the door, a quiet warmth greeted them. The air inside smelled faintly of something cooked earlier in the day. Bread, maybe, or something seasoned lightly. It wasn't the kind of scent that tried to impress. It was the kind that stayed. "Come in," Margaret said. Amara stepped inside. For a moment she didn't say anything. The house was tidy but not staged. A folded blanket rested on the arm of a couch. A pair of reading glasses lay beside a book on a small table. The kitchen was visible from where she stood. Everything in its place, but clearly used. It felt lived in. It felt real, and more than anything it felt warm. Not the polished warmth of a house meant to be admired, but the quiet warmth of a place meant to be lived in. "Sit down for a moment," Margaret said, setting the suitcase aside. "You must be tired." "I'm okay," Amara replied automatically. Margaret looked at her for a second, not challenging her, just observing. "Have you eaten?" she asked. The question was simple. Too simple. Amara blinked slightly. "Not really," Margaret nodded. "Then we'll fix that first." "There's no need to trouble yourself," Amara said quickly. Margaret shook her head, a small smile forming. "Feeding someone who just arrived is not trouble. It's the first thing you do." There was no hesitation in her movements as she walked toward the kitchen. Amara stood there for a moment before slowly sitting down. She didn't realize how tense her shoulders had been until they began to relax. Margaret returned a few minutes later with a simple plate, nothing elaborate, just something warm and thoughtfully prepared. "Here," she said, placing it gently in front of Amara. "Thank you," Amara said softly. Margaret nodded once, then sat across from her. She didn't ask questions. She didn't press for explanations. She didn't mention Houston or marriage or expectations. She simply allowed the silence to exist without making it uncomfortable. Amara took a bite. It was simple food, but it tasted grounding. "You can take your time," Margaret said. "There's no rush here." Amara glanced up slightly. Margaret met her eyes, calm and steady. "In this house," she added quietly, "no one expects you to prove anything on your first day." The words landed deeper than they should have. Amara looked down at her plate again. For the first time in what felt like a long time, she didn't feel like she was being measured. The afternoon passed quietly. Margaret showed her the room she would stay in. It was modest but clean, with a window that faced open land. The sunlight came in softly, carrying with it the distant sound of wind moving across grass. "If you need anything, just let me know," Margaret said. "I will," Amara replied. Margaret paused at the door, then added, "Rest if you can. It's been a long journey." After she left, Amara sat on the edge of the bed for a while. The silence here was different, not heavy, not suffocating, just still. She lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling. This place didn't feel like punishment. That confused her. The sound of a truck pulling up came later in the day. Amara sat up. Footsteps followed, firm, steady, unhurried. She stood, hesitating for just a second before walking toward the door. When she stepped into the hallway, Margaret was already there, a faint smile on her face. "He's home," she said. Amara nodded slightly. Her heartbeat wasn't fast, but it wasn't completely steady either. She stepped into the living room just as the door opened. The man who entered wasn't what she expected. He was taller than she had imagined. His build was strong but not rough, his posture relaxed but controlled. His clothes were simple, work clothes, but clean, well-fitted, not careless. There was nothing exaggerated about him, nothing loud. But there was something unmistakably composed in the way he moved. His eyes lifted, meeting hers, and for a brief moment everything else seemed to quiet down. "Amara?" he asked. His voice was low, even, with a calm confidence that didn't try to prove itself. "Yes," she replied. He stepped forward slightly. "I'm Ethan Cole," he said. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to meet you earlier." "It's okay," Amara said. "I just arrived not too long ago." He nodded once as if he believed her. There was no awkwardness in his expression, no forced politeness, just a kind of quiet awareness. "I brought something," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small box. Not large, not extravagant, but carefully chosen. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. Amara hesitated before taking it. She opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate piece of jewelry, simple, elegant, and unmistakably expensive. Her eyes lifted. "Too much," she said. Ethan shook his head gently. "It's not." The way he said it wasn't dismissive, it was certain. Amara closed the box carefully. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter now. Ethan studied her for a brief second, not intrusively, just enough to notice. Then he stepped back slightly, giving her space without making it obvious. Margaret watched the two of them, her expression calm, almost knowing. The room settled into a quiet again, but this time it felt different, not uncertain, not tense, just unfinished. Amara glanced at Ethan once more. There was something about him she couldn't place, something that didn't match the life she had been told to expect. And for the first time since leaving Houston, a new thought crossed her mind. Maybe this wasn't going to be what she thought it was. That night, Amara didn't sleep immediately. She sat on the edge of the bed, the small box Ethan had given her resting in her hands. She opened it again. The piece inside wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't try to impress in the obvious way expensive things sometimes did, but that was exactly what made it stand out. The craftsmanship was precise, the design was understated. The kind of thing someone chose carefully, not quickly. Amara had seen jewelry like this before, not in stores but on people, women who moved in quiet wealth. Women who didn't need to prove anything because everything about them already did. She closed the box slowly. "This doesn't match," she murmured under her breath. The next morning began quietly. Margaret was already in the kitchen when Amara stepped in. The soft sound of something cooking filled the room. "Good morning," Margaret said. "Good morning," Amara replied. Margaret glanced at her briefly, then back at what she was doing. "Did you sleep enough?" Amara said. "That's a start," Margaret replied lightly. There was a pause. Amara hesitated, then spoke carefully. "The gift Ethan gave me, it was very generous." Margaret didn't look surprised. "He has always had his own way of doing things," she said simply. "That kind of gift isn't small," Amara added. Margaret turned slightly, her expression calm. "No, it isn't." There was no explanation, no apology, no attempt to make it sound less than what it was. Amara studied her for a moment. "You're not surprised," she said. Margaret smiled faintly. "Should I be?" Amara didn't answer, because that was exactly the problem. Nothing about this situation felt like it was supposed to. Ethan came in not long after. He moved the same way he had the day before, steady, unhurried, aware of his surroundings without needing to check them constantly. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," Amara replied. He poured himself a cup of coffee, then leaned lightly against the counter. "You settled in okay?" he asked. "Yes," he nodded once. "Good." There was a brief silence, then Amara spoke. "The gift you gave me," she said, watching his reaction, "it was more than I expected." Ethan didn't flinch. "I'm glad you liked it," he said. "That's not what I meant." He looked at her then, his expression still calm. "I know," he said. There was no defensiveness in his voice. No need to explain himself, no attempt to minimize it, just quiet acceptance of the question behind her words. Amara crossed her arms slightly. "You don't talk about money the way most people do." "How do most people talk about it?" he asked. "They either show it," she said, "or hide it. And what do I do? You act like it's not the point." Ethan considered that for a second. "Because it isn't," he said simply. That answer stayed with her longer than expected. As the day went on, Amara began to notice more things, small things, but too many of them. In the living room there was an old watch placed casually on the shelf near a stack of books. It didn't look new, it didn't try to stand out, but Amara recognized the brand. She had seen it once at an event in Houston. The price of it had been enough to pay someone's yearly salary. She didn't mention it, she just kept looking. There was a framed photograph near the hallway. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A younger version of Ethan standing beside a group of men and women. But their posture wasn't ordinary, their clothing wasn't ordinary. And the way they stood, not around him, but slightly angled toward him, wasn't ordinary either. These were people used to authority, and they weren't ignoring him. Later, a phone rang. Ethan answered it in the kitchen. Amara wasn't trying to listen, but his tone shifted. It became sharper, more precise. "Yes," he said, "that timeline doesn't work." A pause. "No, restructure it. You're looking at short-term efficiency. I'm talking about long-term sustainability." Another pause. "I don't care what the board thinks right now. They'll understand when the numbers stabilize." He hung up without another word. When he turned around, his expression softened again, as if nothing had happened. Amara said nothing, but she noticed. Outside, the truck sat parked near the edge of the property. It looked like any other vehicle used in rural areas, dusty, used, nothing special. But when Ethan opened it later, she saw the inside. Everything was maintained perfectly, not new, but cared for in a way that required time, attention, and discipline. That evening, Ethan handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "For anything you need," he said. She opened it. Inside was a card, simple, black, minimal, no explanation. Amara frowned slightly. "Ethan, just use it," he said. "I don't need." "Use it," he repeated, not forcefully, but firmly. There was something in his tone that made arguing feel unnecessary. Later, when she was alone, she turned the card over in her hand. Then she checked it. The number attached to it made her freeze. She checked again, same result. Her breath slowed. "This is not normal," she whispered. That night, she found him outside. He was sitting near the edge of the property, looking out across the land. Amara approached slowly. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Ethan didn't look surprised. "You can ask me anything. Why do you live here?" she asked. He turned slightly, considering her. "Because this is home," he said. "That's not the full answer." "No," he agreed. There was a pause. Then he added more quietly, "My father built this place, every part of it, and my mother, she belongs here." Amara listened. "I could move her somewhere else," he continued. "Somewhere bigger, easier, but it wouldn't be hers." He looked out again. "And I don't leave people behind just because I can." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Amara felt something shift, not confusion this time, respect. Real respect. She stood there for a moment longer, then nodded slightly. "I understand," she said. Ethan glanced at her just once, and in that glance there was something unspoken, not distance, not closeness, just recognition. As Amara walked back toward the house, one thought stayed with her. He wasn't pretending, he wasn't trying to impress her, and he wasn't explaining himself, which meant one thing. Everything she was seeing was real, but it wasn't the full picture. The mornings in Texas felt different. They didn't rush, they didn't demand, they simply arrived. Amara noticed that on her third day, the sunlight came through the window slowly, not sharply like it did in Houston between tall buildings. Here, it stretched across the floor, soft and patient, as if there was no reason to hurry anything forward. She woke up to the faint sound of movement in the kitchen, not noise, just life. When she stepped outside, Margaret was already there, placing cups on the small table near the porch. "Morning," Margaret said, glancing up. "Good morning," Amara replied. Ethan was sitting on the wooden steps, leaning slightly forward, his elbows resting on his knees, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked like he had been there for a while, not doing anything urgent, just being. "Did you sleep better?" he asked without turning immediately. "A little," Amara said. "That's progress," he replied. There was no pressure in his voice, no expectation, just acknowledgement. Breakfast was simple: eggs, bread, coffee, nothing arranged to impress, nothing designed to perform, and yet it felt more complete than any formal meal Amara had sat through in years. No one checked their phone, no one rushed the conversation. Margaret spoke about small things, the weather, the garden, a neighbor who might stop by later. Ethan listened, he responded when needed. He didn't dominate the space. Amara found herself listening more than speaking, not because she felt small, but because she didn't feel like she needed to fill silence. After breakfast, Ethan stood. "I'll be out for a bit," he said. "There's something I need to check near the south end." Amara nodded. He looked at her briefly. "Take your time here, there's no schedule you need to follow." She wasn't used to that. In Houston, everything had structure, expectations, timelines. Here she was being told there was none. Later that afternoon, she sat on the porch alone. The air carried the faint scent of soil and grass, especially after a brief rain that had passed through earlier. The ground still held the moisture, releasing that distinct earthy smell that made everything feel grounded. A dog wandered across the yard, slow and relaxed, stopping occasionally to sniff at something only it understood. Amara watched it without thinking. She wasn't used to this kind of stillness, not empty, just peaceful. Margaret joined her a few minutes later, sitting beside her without interrupting the quiet. "You're adjusting well," she said. Amara glanced at her. "It's different. Different doesn't always mean worse," Margaret replied. Amara nodded slowly. She looked out at the land again. "No one here is trying to measure me," she said quietly. Margaret didn't respond immediately. "Good," she said after a moment. "They shouldn't." Across the state, in a very different part of Texas, Vanessa Johnson was waking up in a house that looked exactly like everything she had ever wanted. The Whitmore estate stood tall and elegant in river oaks, its structure polished, its landscaping precise, its presence undeniable. Everything about it spoke of wealth, or at least the idea of it. Vanessa walked down the staircase in a silk robe, her expression composed. A maid passed by, offering a polite nod. Vanessa returned it with the same surface-level acknowledgement she had practiced for years. The dining room was already set, perfectly arranged, symmetrical, controlled. Ryan Whitmore was seated at the table, scrolling through something on his phone. "Good morning," Vanessa said, her tone light. Ryan glanced up briefly. "Morning," his voice was polite, but distant. Vanessa sat down, crossing her legs slightly. "Any plans today?" she asked. "Meetings," Ryan replied, "a few calls." He didn't look up again. Vanessa smiled faintly. From the outside, everything looked right. But something felt off. Ryan's mother entered the room moments later. She was elegant, poised, and observant in a way that made Vanessa immediately aware of herself. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," Vanessa replied. Ryan's mother took her seat across from her. "I was speaking with a friend yesterday," she began casually. "She mentioned the Johnson family has done quite well recently." Vanessa nodded slightly. "We've been stable." "Stable is a flexible word," the older woman replied with a faint smile. "What matters is consistency." Vanessa held her expression steady. "And assets," she added. "Consistency is easier with the right foundation." Vanessa understood the question beneath the statement. This wasn't a conversation, it was an evaluation. Throughout the day, Vanessa began to notice more things, subtle things. Ryan's calls were quieter than expected. His meetings were shorter. The confidence in his voice seemed practiced, not natural. And the house, while beautiful, carried a kind of stillness that didn't feel peaceful. It felt controlled, restricted. By evening, the illusion began to thin. Vanessa overheard part of a conversation Ryan was having in his office. "We can't keep delaying it," a voice said through the speaker. "I know," Ryan replied, his tone sharper than usual. "I'm working on it. Working on it isn't enough. We need liquidity." Vanessa stepped back before she could hear more. Her chest tightened slightly. That word stayed with her, liquidity. That night she lay beside Ryan in a bed that was larger than anything she had ever slept in before. The sheets were soft, the room was quiet, everything was perfect. And yet, she stared at the ceiling. It felt cold, not physically, but emotionally. Ryan was beside her, but not with her. Back in Texas, Amara sat by the window in her small room. The night air moved gently through the open space. The house was quiet, but not empty. She could hear faint movement in another room. Margaret, maybe Ethan, it didn't matter. Someone was there. Amara pulled the blanket slightly closer around her. She thought about Houston, about everything she had left behind, about everything she thought she had lost. Then she thought about the day she had just lived, the simple breakfast, the quiet conversations, the absence of pressure. For the first time, a question formed in her mind, not about sacrifice, not about loss, but about truth. In the dark, miles away, Vanessa turned slightly in her bed. Her eyes remained open. She stared into the silence beside her, and for the first time, a thought crossed her mind. Had she taken the wrong life? Dinner that evening felt different, not because of what was on the table, but because of how it was shared. Margaret had prepared the meal, but she didn't stay long after setting everything down. She gave a small smile, as if she understood something neither of them had said out loud. "I'll let you two have some time," she said gently. Amara looked up. "You don't have to." Margaret shook her head softly. "It's your home too now." Then she left. Just like that, no pressure, no expectation. For a moment the room was quiet. Ethan pulled out a chair for Amara without making it feel formal. "Please," he said. Amara sat down slowly. The table was simple. Nothing elaborate, nothing carefully arranged for appearance, but everything felt intentional. Ethan took his seat across from her. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. "Yes," Amara replied, but there was a pause after that. Not awkward, just unfamiliar. They began to eat. The sound of utensils against the plates was soft, steady. Amara realized something after a few moments. No one was watching her. No one was evaluating how she spoke, how she moved, how she held herself. She wasn't performing, she was just there. "You don't have to be careful here," Ethan said suddenly. Amara looked up. "I'm not," she began. "You are," he said gently. There was no accusation in his tone, just observation. Amara hesitated. Then she gave a small, almost apologetic smile. I guess I've gotten used to it. Used to what? He asked. She looked down briefly, being prepared to be. Not enough. The words came out quieter than she expected. Ethan didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to respond. He let the silence settle first. Then he said calmly, "That doesn't apply here." Amara frowned slightly. "You don't know me well enough to say that." Ethan met her gaze. "I know enough," he said, "and more importantly," he paused. "No one here is trying to push you away." The words were simple, but they landed differently. Amara looked at him for a moment longer than she meant to. There was no performance in his expression, no attempt to convince, just certainty. They continued eating. This time the silence felt lighter. Not something to escape, something to share. After dinner, Amara stood to help clear the table. "You don't have to," Ethan said. "I want to," she replied. He nodded once. "Then I won't stop you." That answer surprised her more than refusal would have. Later, when everything was done, the house settled into its quiet rhythm again. Margaret had already gone to her room. The lights were dimmer. The night air moved softly through the open spaces. Amara stood in the doorway of her room for a moment. She hesitated, not because she didn't know where to go, but because she didn't know what was expected next. Ethan appeared at the end of the hallway. He noticed her hesitation immediately. "There's something I should clarify," he said. Amara looked at him. "The room you're in," he continued, "is yours." She blinked slightly. "I thought, you don't have to share anything you're not ready to share," he said. The meaning was clear. Amara felt her shoulders relax in a way she hadn't expected. "You don't have to do that," she said quietly. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Do what?" "Give up your space." He shook his head once. "I'm not giving anything up." There was no hesitation. "No one should feel obligated to move faster than they're ready for," he added. Amara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. Later that night, she sat on the edge of the bed again, but this time the feeling was different. She wasn't tense, she wasn't bracing herself, she was thinking. She thought about the way Ethan spoke, the way he stepped back when it mattered, the way he didn't take advantage of silence, the way he didn't turn kindness into something that demanded a response. A quiet knock came at the door. Amara looked up. "Yes, it's me," Ethan said from the other side. "Come in." He opened the door slightly, not stepping fully inside. "I just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed," he said. "I do," Amara replied. He nodded. There was a brief pause. Then he added almost casually, "If anything ever feels uncomfortable, you can say it." Amara studied him. "Most people say that," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. "And don't mean it?" She gave a faint smile. Usually, he considered that. Then he said simply, "I do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something in the space between them, not tension, not awkwardness, something quieter. Amara became aware of how close he was standing. Not too close, but close enough that she noticed. His presence wasn't overwhelming, but it was steady, grounded. There was a natural confidence in the way he held himself. Not loud, not forced, just there. For a brief second, something shifted, a feeling she hadn't expected, something unfamiliar. Ethan seemed to notice it too, because just as quickly he stepped back, not abruptly, not awkwardly, just enough to restore the space between them. "Good night, Amara," he said. "Good night," she replied. He closed the door quietly behind him. The room felt still again, but not empty. Amara lay down slowly. Her thoughts didn't race, they moved carefully. She had spent so much time preparing herself for disappointment, for rejection, for being too much or not enough. But here, no one was asking her to shrink, no one was asking her to prove anything, no one was taking from her, and that confused her more than anything else. She stared at the ceiling, her hands resting lightly on the blanket. A question formed in her mind, soft, uncertain, but real. If a man like him was truly this kind, truly this patient, truly this safe, would she be able to believe it? The town wasn't used to visitors like Vanessa Whitmore. Even before she stepped out of the car, people noticed. The vehicle itself didn't belong on roads like these, too polished, too expensive, too carefully maintained to blend into the dust and uneven ground. When it came to a stop near the edge of the small town, it drew quiet attention. Vanessa stepped out first, sunglasses, perfect posture, every movement controlled. Ryan followed, adjusting his jacket slightly as if the air itself required correction. "This place feels smaller than I imagined," Vanessa said, glancing around. Ryan gave a polite half-smile. "It's..." Raw, the word carried weight, not neutral, measured. They hadn't come for Amara, not officially. Ryan had mentioned a distant relative living somewhere nearby, someone worth acknowledging for appearances. Vanessa agreed easily. But once she realized how close they were to where Amara lived, she made a decision. "I want to see her," Vanessa said suddenly. Ryan looked at her. "Now yes." He hesitated. "We weren't invited." Vanessa gave a small, dismissive smile. "I don't need an invitation." The drive toward the Cole property wasn't long, but the closer they got, the more the landscape changed. Less structured, more open, more honest. Vanessa didn't like it. When they arrived, the house looked exactly as Amara had first seen it. Simple, clean, unpretentious. Vanessa stepped out slowly, her eyes scanning everything with quiet judgment. "This is where she lives now?" she murmured. Ryan didn't answer. Margaret was outside, tending to something near the porch. She looked up when she heard the car. Her expression didn't change much. "Can I help you?" she asked calmly. Vanessa removed her sunglasses. "You must be Mrs. Cole," she said, her tone polite on the surface but edged. Margaret nodded slightly. I'm Vanessa," she said, "Amara's sister." Margaret studied her for a brief second, then she nodded. "You've come a long way." "Yes," Vanessa replied. "Farther than I expected." There was something in the way she said it. Not admiration, something closer to disapproval. Amara stepped out of the house before anything else could be said. She had heard the car, she had recognized the voice. "Vanessa," she said quietly. Vanessa turned. For a brief second her expression softened, then it disappeared. "Well," she said, looking Amara up and down, "you seem comfortable." "I am," Amara replied. Vanessa let out a small laugh. "That's surprising." Ryan stepped forward slightly. "It's good to see you, Amara." "You too," she said, though her tone remained guarded. Vanessa began walking slowly toward the house, her heels sinking slightly into the dirt. "This place," she said, glancing around, "is exactly what I imagined." Amara didn't respond. Margaret remained still. Vanessa stopped near the porch, her gaze lingering on Margaret again. "You must find it very peaceful out here," she added. Margaret nodded. "Peace doesn't depend on location." Vanessa smiled faintly. "No, but it helps if you don't have much else." The insult was subtle, but clear. Amara's expression tightened slightly. "Vanessa," she said, "that's enough." Vanessa turned toward her. "What? I'm just making conversation," Ryan added lightly. "We didn't mean anything by it." But his tone didn't match the words. Vanessa's eyes moved again, this time landing on Amara's wrist. She paused, then stepped closer. "That's new," she said. Amara instinctively lowered her hand slightly. "It's just..." Vanessa reached out before she could finish, gently catching her wrist. The bracelet caught the light. For a second Vanessa didn't speak, then her expression changed. "This isn't cheap," she said. Amara pulled her hand back. "It was a gift," Vanessa laughed. "A gift?" she repeated. "From who? Him?" The word "him" carried more than curiosity, it carried disbelief. Ryan leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing. "That looks like a designer piece." "It is," Vanessa said. She turned back to Amara, her voice sharper now. "So tell me," she continued, "did you ask for it, or did you just take it?" Amara's face went still. "I didn't take anything," she said calmly. Vanessa tilted her head. "Really? Because this doesn't match your situation." "Stop," Amara said, her voice firmer now. Margaret stepped forward slightly. "That's enough," she said quietly. Vanessa looked at her. "And you are?" she asked. Margaret didn't raise her voice. "I'm the owner of this house." Vanessa smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you are," she said. "That explains the atmosphere." The tension shifted, it was no longer subtle. Amara stepped between them. "You don't get to come here and speak to her like that," she said. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Or what?" Amara held her ground. "For once," she said, "you don't get to take something that isn't yours." The words landed, hard. A few people nearby had started to notice. Neighbors, passing workers, they slowed, watched. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. "Listen to you," Ryan added quietly. "We should go," but Vanessa didn't move, not yet. "You think this changes anything?" she asked. Amara didn't answer. Vanessa stepped closer again. "This is temporary," she said. "Everything about this is temporary." A truck engine sounded in the distance, low, steady, approaching. The sound cut through the tension. Everyone heard it. Everyone turned. The truck came to a stop. Dust settled slowly around it. The door opened. Ethan stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't react immediately. He just took in the scene. His eyes moved once, from Vanessa to Ryan to Amara to Margaret. Then he walked forward, calm, measured, controlled. He stopped just a few feet away and spoke. "Who gave you permission," he said quietly, "to come onto my property and speak to my mother like that?" The air changed completely. Vanessa blinked, just once. Because this was not the man she expected. For a moment after Ethan spoke, no one answered. The air held still, not because people didn't hear him, but because they did. And they understood exactly what his words meant. Vanessa straightened slightly, trying to recover the control she had lost in a single sentence. "I didn't realize we needed permission to visit family," she said, her tone sharpening again. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "She is my family now," he replied. The words were calm, but final. Ryan stepped forward, attempting to smooth the situation. "There's no need to escalate this," he said politely. "We simply stopped by to insult my mother," Ethan asked. Ryan paused. Just for a second, but it was enough. Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're overreacting." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling: clarity. That was when a voice came from behind. "Ethan doesn't overreact." Everyone turned. An older man walked forward slowly, his posture steady despite his age. He wore a simple shirt, worn from years of use but clean. "Pastor Lewis," Margaret said softly. The man nodded. "I heard voices," he said. "Figured I should come by." He looked at Vanessa, then at Ryan, then back at Ethan. "This young man," he continued, "has never once raised his voice in this town without reason." Vanessa frowned. "And who are you supposed to be?" "Someone who knows the truth," the pastor replied calmly. Another voice joined. "Yeah, we all do." A man stepped forward from the side of the road. Grease stains marked his hands, his shirt, his sleeves. "Tom," Ethan said with a slight nod. Tom nodded back. "Garage is closed early today. Thought I'd see what the noise was about." He looked at Vanessa, then at Ryan. "You picked the wrong place to act like that," he said plainly. Vanessa laughed lightly. "This is ridiculous." But no one laughed with her. A woman approached next, holding the hand of a young boy. Behind her stood a man, quiet but watchful. "They're not from here," she said softly. "No," Tom replied, "they're not." The pastor stepped forward again. "You asked who I am," he said, looking directly at Vanessa. "I'm the one who watched Ethan help rebuild this town when no one else would." Vanessa's expression flickered. "What does that even mean?" she asked. Tom answered this time. "It means when the farm started failing, he didn't walk away," he said. "He made sure people had work, real work, not charity, work that kept food on the table." The woman beside him nodded. "My husband works on his land," she added, "and for the first time in years we don't worry about losing our home." Ryan's posture shifted slightly. He wasn't smiling anymore. Another man stepped forward, older, quiet, a teacher's posture. "Ethan funded the school program when the district cut our budget," he said. "Books, supplies, scholarships." He looked at Amara briefly. "Kids who never thought they'd leave this place now have a chance." Vanessa blinked, just once. "And when the bank tried to take back land from families who couldn't keep up with payments," the pastor continued. He looked at Ethan, then back at Vanessa. "He bought it." Vanessa frowned. "So he's a landlord now?" "No," Tom said. "He gave it back," the pastor corrected. Silence followed that, heavy, real. Ethan didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct anything. He just stood there. Amara watched all of it. Every word, every voice, every piece of truth being spoken, not by Ethan, but by the people around him. For the first time in her life, she saw what real value looked like. Not a name, not a reputation, not a title, but impact. Vanessa took a step back. "This doesn't change anything," she said, but her voice had lost its sharpness. Ryan didn't speak. He was watching Ethan differently now, measuring, recalculating. Ethan finally spoke again. "I'm not interested in explaining myself," he said calmly. His eyes moved from Vanessa to Ryan. "I'm asking you to leave." Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it, because for the first time, she realized she wasn't in control of this situation. Ryan placed a hand lightly on her arm. "We should go," he said quietly. This time she didn't argue. They turned, walked back toward the car, not quickly, but not confidently either. The engine started, dust lifted again, and then they were gone. The silence that followed felt different, lighter. The pastor nodded once at Ethan. "You handled that well." Ethan gave a small nod in return. "Thank you." Tom clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Always do." One by one, the people began to leave. No ceremony, no lingering, just quiet understanding. Amara stood still. She didn't move immediately, didn't speak. Margaret touched her arm gently before heading back inside, leaving her alone with Ethan. "I'm sorry," Amara said softly. Ethan looked at her. "For what?" "For them," she replied. "For what they said, for what they did." Ethan shook his head. "That's not yours to carry," he said. "They're my family," she insisted. "They chose their actions," he replied. "That's theirs." Amara looked down briefly. "I should have stopped it sooner." Ethan's voice remained steady. "You stopped it when it mattered." She looked up at him. There was no judgment in his expression, no disappointment, no expectation. "People choose who they are," he said. "Kindness, cruelty, respect." He paused. "That choice doesn't belong to you." Something inside Amara shifted, deep, quiet, but undeniable. For the first time, she didn't feel responsible for someone else's wrong. Her eyes filled slightly, though she didn't let the tears fall. "Thank you," she said. Ethan didn't respond with words. He just nodded once, and in that moment, Amara realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe before. She wasn't just safe here, she was protected. The incident happened 3 days later. It was early evening when the sound of a truck rushing past the house broke the usual calm rhythm of the farm. The engine was louder than normal, strained, urgent. Amara stepped out onto the porch instinctively. "What's going on?" she asked. Ethan had already turned his head toward the road. "Something's wrong," he said. They found out minutes later. An elderly man from the neighboring property had collapsed. His daughter had tried to call for help, but the ambulance couldn't reach them in time. The road leading into that part of the land was too rough, too narrow, too unstable after the rain from the night before, so they did what people here always did. They drove him themselves. The truck struggled as it disappeared into the distance. The dust didn't settle for a long time. Amara stood still, her eyes fixed on the road, the uneven surface, the broken edges, the way the tires had sunk slightly into the softer parts. "If that happens at night," she said slowly. Ethan didn't respond immediately. "If it rains harder," she continued, her voice tightening, "or if it's someone worse, they might not make it out in time." Ethan looked at the road. "I know," he said quietly. Amara turned toward him. "Then why hasn't it been fixed?" Ethan took a breath. "I've thought about it," he admitted. "More than once." "Then why not do it?" "Because I didn't want it to feel like something I gave them," he said. Amara frowned. "I didn't want it to become a favor," Ethan continued, "or something that made people feel like they owed me." He looked at her. "I wanted it to belong to them." Amara held his gaze. "And what happens while we wait for the perfect version of that?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer, because he didn't have one. "They could lose someone," Amara said quietly. The words weren't dramatic, they didn't need to be. The silence between them shifted. That night, Amara didn't sleep easily, not because of fear, but because of clarity. The next morning, she found Ethan near the edge of the property. "I've been thinking," she said. He nodded slightly. "So have I." She stepped closer. "You were right," she said. "It shouldn't feel like a favor." Ethan waited. "But it also shouldn't be delayed because of that," she continued. "Not when it affects people's safety." Ethan studied her. "Go on," he said. "We can fund most of it," Amara said, quietly, "but the work, the planning, the execution." She paused. "It should come from the community." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. "We hire locally," she said. "We make everything transparent, costs, materials, timeline." She looked at him directly. "No hidden control, no ownership, just structure." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And what does that change?" he asked. "It changes how they see it," Amara replied. "Not as something given." She paused, "but as something built." The wind moved lightly across the field. Ethan didn't speak immediately, then he nodded. "That works," he said. It wasn't a dramatic moment, but it mattered. The first meeting was held 2 days later, in a small town hall that hadn't seen this many people gathered in years. Amara stood beside Ethan, not behind him, not in the background, beside him. People filled the space slowly, farmers, workers, families. There's some people who had stood up for Ethan days before. Ethan didn't lead the meeting the way most would expect. He didn't stand at the front and speak first. He listened. Amara noticed that immediately. When he did speak, it was brief, clear. "To fix the road," he said, "we need a plan that works for everyone." Then he stepped back. The conversation opened. Maps were brought out, old ones, new ones. People pointed at areas that flooded easily, sections that cracked under pressure, places where vehicles often got stuck. Amara took notes, carefully, thoroughly. She asked questions, not as someone giving orders, but as someone trying to understand. How many miles are we covering? What kind of material holds best in this soil? Who here has worked on something like this before? Hands went up. Voices followed. Ethan watched her, quietly. He didn't interrupt, he didn't correct, he didn't take over. He let her lead. That mattered too. Over the next week, everything began to take shape. Suppliers were contacted, permits were reviewed, budgets were outlined. Amara worked through details she had never expected to handle. Measurements, costs, logistics. Ethan filled in gaps when needed, but never in a way that took control away from her. They worked side by side, not as strangers, not as people forced into something, but as partners. One evening, as they reviewed the final plan, Amara leaned back slightly. "I didn't think this would feel like this," she admitted. "Like what?" Ethan asked. "Like something that matters," she said. Ethan looked at her. "It does matter," he replied. She nodded slowly. "I know." The morning construction began. The energy in the town felt different, not excited, not loud, but proud. People showed up early, tools in hand, ready. The first section of the road was marked, the ground was cleared, and then work began. Amara stood beside Ethan as the first layer was laid down. She watched it carefully, the movement, the coordination, the purpose. "This is real," she said softly. Ethan glanced at her. "It always was," he replied. She shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "this is different, because for the first time, she wasn't just surviving something. She was building something. And that changed everything." Miles away, in Houston, a conversation had already begun. "Have you heard about this?" someone asked. Vanessa looked up. "What?" "A road project. Funded privately, rural Texas." Vanessa frowned slightly. "Why would I care?" The person hesitated. "Because the name's involved." Vanessa's expression changed. "Say it," she said. And when she heard it, the silence that followed was anything but calm. Vanessa didn't react immediately after hearing the news. But that didn't mean she ignored it. It meant something worse. She remembered it. A road project, the woman had said casually during the gathering in Houston. Privately funded, rural Texas, quite unusual. Vanessa had dismissed it at first, until the name came up. Amara, Ethan Cole. She hadn't spoken for the rest of that conversation, but the silence that followed her was not calm. It was calculating. Later that night, Vanessa stood alone in front of the large window in the Whitmore house, staring out at the perfectly trimmed garden. Everything looked flawless, symmetrical, controlled, and yet, it felt empty. "A road?" she murmured under her breath. Her fingers tightened slightly around the glass in her hand. "A farmer is funding a road?" She let out a short laugh. "No," she said quietly, "that's not possible." But the problem wasn't the project, it was what it implied. The next morning, she brought it up. Ryan was sitting across from her, reading through a set of documents. "There's something I want to ask you," Vanessa said. Ryan didn't look up immediately. "What is it?" "This Ethan Cole," she said. "Have you heard anything about him?" Ryan paused just slightly. Then he lowered the papers. "I've heard the name," he said. Vanessa leaned forward, and Ryan exhaled slowly. "Not much," he admitted. "Unusual." Vanessa frowned. "Unusual how?" Right, tapping the edge of the table lightly. "In our world," he said, "people with money leave a trail." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "And he doesn't?" Ryan shook his head slightly. Not a clear one. That answer didn't satisfy her. It made things worse. Because Vanessa understood one thing very well. If someone with money wasn't visible, it wasn't because they didn't have power. It was because they didn't need to show it. Over the next few days, Vanessa paid closer attention, more than she ever had before. She listened during conversations, watched reactions, noticed names, and slowly, patterns began to form. At a private lunch, one of Ryan's associates mentioned a land acquisition deal that had been quietly resolved in West Texas. "It was handled cleanly," he said. "No pressure, no noise." "Who handled it?" Ryan asked casually. The man hesitated. "Not entirely sure," he said, "but the structure, it wasn't amateur." Vanessa said nothing, but she remembered. Later, at a different gathering, another name came up, a logistics company, small on paper, but connected to several larger operations. "Who owns it?" someone asked. No idea, came the answer. It's layered. Layered. Vanessa felt something tighten in her chest. That word again, not simple, not visible, not obvious. She went home that evening with a different expression on her face. Less confident, more focused. Ryan noticed it. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking, she replied. He studied her for a moment. About what? Vanessa turned toward him. About the possibility that we made a mistake. Ryan didn't respond immediately. You saw the way people reacted to him, she continued. Not just in that town, here too. Ryan leaned back slightly. There are connections, he admitted, but nothing concrete. Vanessa's voice dropped. That's exactly the problem. Because in her world, the most dangerous people weren't the loud ones. They were the ones you couldn't trace. That night, Vanessa made a call. I need information, she said, her tone controlled. The person on the other end didn't ask many questions. Name, they asked. Ethan Cole. There was a pause. Then, I'll see what I can find. Days passed. Vanessa checked her phone more often than she admitted. Her patience thinned. When the report finally came in, it wasn't what she expected, or rather it wasn't enough. She sat at the table, flipping through the pages. Cole Agricultural Holdings, Cole Land Management, various small subsidiaries, nothing direct, nothing obvious, but too many connections. She turned another page, a name appeared, Daniel Reeves. Vanessa stopped. Who is that? She whispered. She searched further, minimal information. An assistant, a representative, someone who appeared in documents, but never at the center. Vanessa leaned back slowly, her mind racing. This doesn't make sense, she said. Because the more she looked, the less clear it became, and that scared her more than anything else. Ryan walked in just as she closed the file. What did you find? He asked. Vanessa looked up. Her eyes were sharper now, colder, more focused than before. Not enough, Ryan frowned. Meaning he's not who he says he is? Ryan didn't argue, because deep down, he was starting to think the same thing. Vanessa stood up slowly, her hand resting on the table. For the first time since Houston, she wasn't reacting, she was planning. I don't like not knowing, she said. Ryan watched her carefully. What are you going to do? Vanessa's lips curved slightly, but there was no warmth in it. I'm going to find out everything. She paused, then added, her voice low and certain, and when I do. Her eyes hardened. I'm going to expose him. The days that followed didn't feel extraordinary, and yet, they changed everything. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, no moments designed to impress. Just small things, repeated quietly, consistently. Amara noticed it first in the mornings. By the fourth day of working on the road project, Ethan no longer asked how she liked her coffee. He simply made it. Not too strong, not too bitter, just enough warmth, just enough depth. She didn't mention it the first time, or the second. But on the third morning she paused before taking the cup. You remembered, she said softly. Ethan glanced at her briefly. You told me once, he replied, that was all. No attempt to make it meaningful, no expectation of gratitude, and somehow that made it matter more. Later that afternoon they stood near the edge of the construction site, reviewing a set of notes. The wind moved lightly across the land, carrying the sound of distant work. Ethan adjusted his shirt slightly as he turned. Amara noticed the collar had folded inward. Without thinking, she stepped closer. Hold on, she said quietly. Ethan paused. Her fingers moved carefully, straightening the fabric. The motion was simple, almost instinctive, but when she pulled her hand back, she realized how close they were standing. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan stepped back, not abruptly, not awkwardly, just enough the space returned, and with it, a quiet understanding. That evening they sat in the back of the truck. The work had ended for the day. The town had grown quiet again. The sky stretched wide above them, painted in soft shades of orange and fading gold. Amara leaned back slightly, her hands resting beside her. I used to think silence meant something was wrong, she said. Ethan didn't look at her. Because of where you came from, he asked. She nodded. Silence meant someone was thinking something they weren't saying, she continued, or waiting for the right moment to say something that would hurt. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. That's why I always tried to speak first, she added. To control it, to prepare. And here, he asked. Amara looked out at the horizon. Here, she said slowly. It doesn't feel like that. Ethan nodded slightly. Silence doesn't have to mean absence, he said. It can mean peace. They stayed there for a while longer. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. Over the next few days, the distance between them changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Amara began to speak more, not about surface things, but about what she had carried. "I spent years thinking I had to earn my place," she said one afternoon as they walked along the half-finished road. Ethan kept his pace steady beside her. "If I worked harder, if I stayed quieter, if I gave more, then maybe I wouldn't be replaced." Ethan didn't correct her, didn't try to fix the thought. He just listened. "And then one day," she continued, "I realized it didn't matter how much I gave." Her voice softened. They were always going to take more. The wind moved across the ground between them. Ethan stopped walking. Amara did too. "You shouldn't have had to prove your worth like that," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Amara looked at him. "You didn't try to argue with me," she said. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You weren't wrong," he replied. That answer surprised her. Most people would have tried to comfort her, to reframe it, to make it sound better than it was, but he didn't. He accepted it, and somehow, that made it easier to let go. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch, Ethan spoke again. "There's something I should say," he said. Amara looked at him. "I don't live the way most people expect," he continued. She waited. "I have access to things," he said carefully. "More than what you see here." Amara didn't interrupt. "But I've never wanted to be judged by that," he added. He looked at her directly. "I wanted to be judged by how I live." The words were simple, but they carried truth. Amara held his gaze. "I think you are," she said. Ethan didn't respond, but something in his expression softened. The moment that followed wasn't planned. It didn't build dramatically. It just happened. Amara shifted slightly closer. Ethan didn't move away. Their eyes met. There was no confusion now, no uncertainty about what was growing between them, just awareness, real, quiet, undeniable. Amara's breath slowed slightly. Ethan's hand rested near hers, not touching but close enough. For a second, it felt like everything was aligning toward one moment, and then Amara stepped back, not sharply, not out of fear, just not yet. Ethan didn't question it. He didn't ask why. He simply nodded once. "I understand," he said, and that was enough. That night, Amara lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts didn't feel heavy anymore, they felt clear. For the first time, she asked herself a different question. Not what she had lost, but what she had found. The next morning, everything continued as usual. Work, meetings, progress, until Ethan's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer it. Amara didn't mean to listen, but she heard one name clearly. She looked up. Ethan's tone shifted slightly. More focused, more direct. "Yes," he said, understood. A pause then. "Make sure everything is ready." Another pause. "On schedule." He hung up. When he turned back, his expression was calm again. "What is it?" Amara asked. Ethan studied her for a moment, then he said simply, "It's time." The idea of a wedding didn't come suddenly. It had been there quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment. It was Ethan who brought it up. They were standing near the newly paved section of the road, watching workers finish the final layer. The project was nearly complete. The town felt different now, more connected, more alive. Ethan looked out across the distance before speaking. "We should make it official," he said. Amara turned to him. Her heart didn't race. Not like it would have before. It settled. "You mean?" she said calmly. There was no pressure in his tone, no expectation, just a simple statement. Amara held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," she said. From that point on, things began to change. Not in small ways, but in ways that were impossible to ignore. Daniel Reeves arrived 2 days later. For the first time, Amara saw him in person. He didn't look like someone who belonged to this place. His suit was sharp. Not flashy, but precise. His posture was controlled, his movements efficient. "Mrs. Cole," he said with a respectful nod. Amara paused slightly. He didn't call her Miss Johnson. He didn't hesitate. He spoke as if everything had already been decided long before she arrived. "Daniel," Ethan said. There was a brief exchange between them. Quiet, professional, too professional. Amara noticed it immediately. This wasn't how people spoke to a farmer. From that moment on, Daniel didn't leave. He coordinated everything, phone calls, meetings, schedules, and wherever he went, people followed. The first vendor arrived that same afternoon, a catering team. They stepped out of their vehicles with practiced efficiency, their uniforms clean, their demeanor respectful. But when they spoke to Ethan, it changed. "Mr. Cole," the lead coordinator said. Not casual, not friendly. respectful, measured, almost deferential. Amara watched quietly. She had seen this before, but not here, not in this setting. The second day, a group from a luxury hotel chain arrived. Amara frowned slightly. "We don't have a hotel here," she said. "They're not here for that," Ethan replied. She didn't ask further. But she noticed. They walked through the property, took notes, made adjustments, as if preparing for something much larger than a small-town wedding. Then came the security team. That was the moment things stopped making sense. 3 black vehicles, men stepping out. Not aggressive, not obvious, but trained. Amara recognized the way they moved, the way they observed, the way they positioned themselves. This wasn't casual protection. This was structured, professional. She turned to Ethan. "You didn't mention security," she said. Ethan didn't seem surprised. "It's precaution," he replied. "For a wedding?" she asked. "For everything that comes with it," he said. That answer didn't explain anything, but it confirmed everything. The dress came next. Daniel arranged it. Of course he did. Amara didn't expect much. Something simple, elegant, appropriate for the setting. But when she saw it, she stopped breathing for a second. It wasn't just beautiful, it was extraordinary. The fabric moved like it had been designed for light itself. The details were precise beyond reason, the craftsmanship undeniable. Amara touched the sleeve carefully. "This is too much," she said quietly. Daniel didn't react. "It was selected for you," he replied, "not offered, selected, as if there had never been another option." Amara looked at Ethan. He met her gaze. "Try it," he said softly. She did, and when she stood in front of the mirror, she didn't recognize herself, not because of the dress, but because of how she felt wearing it. Not like someone pretending, but like someone who finally belonged in something she never thought she deserved. The guest list grew quickly, too quickly. At first it made sense. People from the town, families, workers, friends. But then names began to appear from Dallas, Austin, Houston, names Amara had heard before, not personally, but in conversations, in business events, in rooms she had once been allowed to stand in, but never truly be part of. She looked at the list again. "This isn't a small wedding," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. Amara turned to him. "Ethan," she said carefully, "what exactly is happening?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he stepped closer. "On the day of the wedding," he said quietly, "I want you to see everything with your own eyes." Amara frowned. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." She searched his expression. "You're asking me to trust you," she said. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, the word settled between them, not heavy, but absolute. Miles away, Vanessa sat across from Ryan, staring at her phone. The news had spread faster than expected. "A private wedding," she read aloud. "High-profile guests, unusual scale." Ryan leaned forward slightly. "That's not normal," he said. "No," Vanessa replied, her eyes narrowed. "It's not." She looked up slowly. "This is our chance," she said. Ryan studied her. "For what?" "To see who he really is," Vanessa said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes weren't. Ryan leaned back. "We weren't invited." Vanessa smiled slightly. "That's never stopped me before." There was a pause. Then Ryan nodded. "Fine," he said. Vanessa stood up, her decision already made. "We're going," she said, and for the first time, she wasn't going to take something. She was going to expose it. The day of the wedding arrived without chaos. No rushing, no confusion, no last-minute panic. Everything was already in place. Amara noticed it the moment she stepped outside. The land had been transformed, not in a loud, extravagant way, but in a way that felt intentional. Rows of white chairs stretched across the open field, aligned perfectly but not rigidly. Soft fabric moved gently with the wind. Floral arrangements blended with the natural landscape rather than overpowering it. It didn't feel like a performance. It felt like something meant to belong exactly where it was, and yet it was far too refined to be ordinary. People had already begun to arrive. The first were from the town, families, workers, the same faces that had stood beside Ethan. They didn't look out of place. They looked welcomed, not invited for appearance, but included with purpose. Then came the second group, and everything shifted. Cars arrived one after another, not flashy, but unmistakably expensive. The people stepping out carried themselves differently, controlled, measured. Their clothing understated but precise, their movements quiet but confident. Amara recognized the type instantly. These were not guests from a small town. These were people who made decisions that affected entire industries. She stood still. "Ethan," she began. He turned to her. "Just watch," he said softly. Vanessa and Ryan arrived last. Their car stopped at the far edge of the property. Vanessa stepped out slowly, her eyes scanning everything. For a moment, she didn't speak, then she laughed. "This," she said quietly, "this is what he's been hiding behind?" Ryan adjusted his jacket. "It's well arranged," he admitted, "but this doesn't belong to him." Vanessa smirked. "Of course it doesn't," she said. She looked toward the guests. "This is sponsored," she added. "Someone is backing him." They walked forward, heads turning slightly as they passed, not in admiration, but in recognition, and not the kind they expected. The ceremony hadn't started yet. Amara stood near the front, her dress moved lightly with the wind. She didn't feel nervous, she felt aware of everything. Daniel Reeves stepped forward. And in that moment, everything changed. He didn't look an assistant anymore. He looked like someone in control. "Everything is ready, sir," he said, "sir." The word didn't echo, but it landed. Vanessa froze. Ryan's expression shifted. Then another man approached, older, sharp. "Good to see you again," he said to Ethan, not casual. "Respectful." "You as well," Ethan replied. A third voice joined. "We've finalized the expansion proposal. We'll proceed once you give the word." Vanessa's breath caught. She turned to Ryan. "Do you hear this?" she whispered. Ryan didn't answer. Because he was already watching Ethan differently. The pieces began to align, too quickly, too clearly. Daniel stepped slightly forward again, and this time he didn't lower his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. The crowd quieted, not forced, naturally. "As we gather today," he paused, "we are honored to witness not only a union, but the personal commitment of a man who has built something far greater than most will ever understand." Vanessa's heart dropped. Daniel continued. "Mr. Ethan Cole," the name felt different now. "Founder of Cole Agricultural and Infrastructure Group, a private investment network managing assets across agriculture, logistics, and renewable energy. With a valuation exceeding multiple billions." The silence broke. Not loudly, but deeply. Amara didn't move. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Ethan. And for the first time, everything made sense. Vanessa took a step back. "No," she said under her breath, "this is not real." Ryan's face had gone pale. He knew, he understood what that meant. Not just wealth, power, influence, reach. And more importantly, he understood something else. He had been in the same room as this man before, and didn't recognize him. Vanessa shook her head. "He's lying," she said. But her voice didn't carry, because no one was listening to her anymore. Ethan stepped forward, not to defend himself, not to explain, just to stand beside Amara. The officiant began speaking. The ceremony moved forward as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Vanessa couldn't hold it in anymore. "This is a performance," she said sharply. Heads turned. "Not many, but enough." "You think this changes who you are," she continued, her voice rising. "You're still just a man pretending to be something bigger." Ethan didn't react immediately. He let the silence settle. Then he turned. "Slowly, security," he said calmly. The men who had been standing at the edges stepped forward, not aggressively but with certainty. "Please escort them out," Ethan added. Vanessa stared at him. "You're throwing me out?" she asked. Ethan's expression didn't change. "I'm asking you to respect this moment," he said. "You've refused." Ryan placed a hand on her arm. "We should go," he said quietly. This time, she didn't resist, because she understood. She had already lost. They were escorted out, not dragged, not humiliated loudly, but removed. And outside, for the first time in her life, inside, the ceremony continued. Amara stood across from Ethan, her hands steady, her eyes clear. "You didn't tell me," she said softly. Ethan met her gaze. "I wanted you to choose me," he replied, "and not what I have." Amara nodded. "I did," she said, and in that moment she meant it. Their vows were simple. No grand promises, no dramatic declarations, just truth. "I choose you," Ethan said, "not because of where we stand today, but because of how you see the world." Amara's voice was softer. "But I choose you because you never made me feel like I had to earn my place beside you." The wind moved gently across the field. The sun lowered slowly, and for the first time in her life, Amara understood something clearly. She hadn't been sent away to lose everything. She had been sent to find her life. The fall didn't happen in one moment. It never does. It began quietly, almost invisibly. 3 days after the wedding, Ryan received the first call. He was in his office, the same one that had once made him feel important. Now it felt smaller. "We're going to have to pause the partnership," the voice on the other end said. Ryan frowned. "Pause on what grounds?" "Reputation risk." the man replied. That word again. Reputation. Ryan tightened his grip on the phone. We've worked together for years. Yes, the voice said calmly, and we value that. But recent developments. The sentence wasn't finished. It didn't need to be. The call ended. Ryan sat still for a long time. Then came the second call, then the third, and by the end of the week, there were no calls left to answer, only silence. The Whitmore name, once enough to open doors, was now the reason they stayed closed, not because of scandal, but because of something worse. Exposure. People had started asking questions, quietly, carefully. And when those questions led to answers, they didn't like what they found. The Whitmores had been surviving on perception, carefully maintained, strategically protected. But once that perception cracked, there was nothing underneath strong enough to hold it together. Ryan stood in the same dining room where everything had once looked perfect. Now it felt staged. Like a set after the actors had left. Vanessa stood across from him, her expression no longer controlled, no longer polished. You said this wouldn't happen, she said. Ryan didn't respond immediately. Because he couldn't. You told me this family was stable, she continued. It was, he said sharply. Was, she repeated. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. Vanessa laughed. But there was nothing light about it. So that's it, she said. You built your entire life on was? Ryan stood up. This isn't just about me, he said. Vanessa stepped forward. No, she replied. It's about me choosing you. The silence that followed was sharp. I gave up everything, Vanessa said, her voice cracked for the first time. I gave up a better life. Ryan's expression hardened. You didn't give up anything, he said. You took what you thought was better. Vanessa froze because that was the truth. And truth hits differently when there's nothing left to hide behind. You chose a name, Ryan continued. Not a man. Vanessa's breath shook. And you? She shot back. You chose a wife for status. Neither of them denied it, because neither of them could. The argument didn't explode. It collapsed. Slow, quiet, inevitable. Within weeks, the separation wasn't officially understood. Not announced, but visible. They stopped appearing together, stopped pretending, stopped trying. Vanessa moved out first, not because she wanted to, but because staying meant facing what she had done, every day. And she couldn't. Meanwhile, miles away, life moved differently. Amara stood in front of the new house. It was larger than the old one, but not overwhelming, not distant. It still felt like a home. Margaret stood beside her, adjusting a small plant near the entrance. You don't need to make it perfect, she said gently. Amara smiled faintly. I know, she replied. But I want it to feel right. Inside, Ethan was reviewing something on his desk, not because he needed to, but because that was who he was. Structured, focused, grounded. Amara watched him for a moment, then stepped inside. You're working again, she said lightly. Ethan looked up. Just finishing something, he replied. She nodded, then walked closer. I used to think this kind of life would change everything, she said. Ethan tilted his head slightly. What kind of life? He asked. Amara glanced around. The one I thought I lost, she said. Ethan didn't respond immediately. And now? He asked. Amara smiled. Now I realize, she paused, it was never mine to begin with. Ethan stood up slowly, walked toward her. And this, he asked. Amara looked at him, at the house, at the quiet, at the life they were building. This is, she said. And for the first time, there was no doubt in her voice. That evening they sat outside together, the same way they had before, on simple chairs, watching the sun fade. Nothing about it was extravagant, but everything about it was real. A car approached slowly, unfamiliar. Amara turned her head. Ethan did too. The car stopped at the edge of the property. Two figures stepped out. Amara's breath stilled. Vanessa and their father. They didn't walk forward immediately, as if unsure whether they were allowed to. Ethan stood, not tense, not aggressive, just present. Amara didn't move. Not yet, because something inside her had already shifted. This wasn't the same girl who left Houston. This wasn't someone waiting to be judged or chosen. This was someone who had already chosen her own life. Vanessa finally took a step forward, slow, careful. Their father followed. And for the first time, they didn't look powerful. They looked like people who had run out of options. Amara exhaled slowly. Let them come, she said. Ethan nodded once, because whatever happened next would not be about revenge. It would be about truth. They didn't enter the house immediately. Marcus Johnson and Vanessa stood at the edge of the property, as if unsure whether they still had the right to step forward. Amara walked toward them slowly, not hesitant, not afraid, just steady. Ethan stayed a step behind her, not leading, not interrupting, but present in a way that made it clear. She was not alone anymore. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus cleared his throat. "You look well," he said. It sounded like something a father should say, but it felt empty. "I am," Amara replied. Vanessa crossed her arms. Her eyes scanned everything, the house, the land, Ethan standing behind Amara. "This is where you ended up," she said. Amara didn't react. Vanessa let out a quiet breath. "We didn't come here to argue," Marcus added quickly. Amara looked at him. "Then why are you here?" she asked. The question was simple, but it stripped away everything unnecessary. Marcus hesitated. Vanessa didn't. "We need help," she said. "Not an apology, not regret, just need." Amara nodded slightly. "I see," she said. Marcus stepped forward. "There have been complications," he began. Amara didn't interrupt. Vanessa's voice cut in. "You know exactly what that means." Amara held her gaze. "Yes," she said. "I do." For a brief moment, it almost looked like Vanessa might soften, but she didn't. Instead, she said something else, something she had been holding on to for too long. "This life," Vanessa said, her voice tightening, "was supposed to be mine." The words didn't explode, they landed, heavy, unavoidable. Amara didn't look shocked, she looked calm. "Was it?" she asked. Vanessa frowned. "You were never meant for this," she said. "You never wanted it." "That's true," Amara replied. She paused. "But neither did you," she added. The silence that followed was sharp. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "We made decisions based on what we thought was best," he said. Amara looked at him. "For who?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately, because he couldn't. "I thought," he began slowly, "that Vanessa would fit better in that world." Was the truth, late, but still real. Amara nodded once. "I know," she said. The words didn't carry anger, and somehow that made them heavier. Vanessa's expression hardened again. "So what now?" she said. "You're just going to stand there and act like you're better than us?" Amara shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I'm just not going to be less than myself anymore." Vanessa laughed sharply. "Please," she said. "You still can't even give him a child." The words cut through the air, cold, deliberate. For a moment, everything stilled. Then Ethan stepped forward, not quickly, not aggressively, just enough. "Say that again," he said calmly. Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, Ethan didn't raise his voice, but his presence filled the space. "My wife's value," he said, "does not begin or end with her ability to have children." The words were firm, final, undeniable. Vanessa didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. Ethan turned slightly toward Amara, then added more quietly, "I knew who she was long before any of this." Amara looked at him. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Ethan met her gaze. "A few years ago," he said, "I saw you on the side of the road." She frowned slightly. "You stopped for someone," he continued. "A man you didn't know. You stayed until help came." Amara's memory shifted, faint but there. "I remember that," she said slowly. Ethan nodded. "I didn't forget," he replied. The moment settled between them, quiet, real. Amara turned back to her father, then to Vanessa. "I'm not going to give you money," she said. Marcus's shoulders dropped slightly. Vanessa's expression tightened. "But," Amara continued, "I'm not going to leave you without options either." They both looked at her. "There are people you can speak to," she said. "Consulting work, smaller firms. It's not what you had before," she paused, "but it's something real." She looked at Vanessa. "And there are places you can stay. Not permanent, not comfortable, but safe." Vanessa's lips pressed together. "This isn't help," she said. Amara nodded. "I know," she replied, "because real help doesn't always look like rescue. Sometimes it looks like a boundary." They didn't stay long after that. Marcus nodded once before turning away. Vanessa hesitated
For just a second.
then followed. Amara watched them leave, not with anger, not with regret, just clarity. Later that evening, she stood alone on the road, the one they had built. The ground beneath her feet was solid now, steady, reliable. She looked out across the land, the fields, the sky, the life ahead of her, and for the first time, everything made sense. She hadn't lost anything. She had simply stopped holding on to what was never meant for her, and in doing so, she had found everything that was. Final reflection: what this story leaves behind word count. 3-2. Some stories don't end with victory, they end with understanding. If there is one thing this story quietly reminds us, it is this: people are not what they appear to be at first glance. A man can live simply and still carry more power than those who spend their lives trying to display it. And a woman who was once overlooked, underestimated, or even sacrificed can become someone who chooses her own path without needing to prove anything to anyone. Real wealth is not loud. It does not rush to introduce itself. It shows up in how someone treats people who cannot offer anything in return. And family. Family is not always the place where we are loved the right way. Sometimes it is the place where we learn what we will no longer accept. Respect, dignity, and kindness are not modern ideas. They are timeless ones, and when they are missing, no amount of status can replace them. Love, when it is real, does not make you feel smaller. It does not demand that you become less. It gives you space to be more of who you already are. And boundaries, they are not rejection. They are not cruelty. They are the quiet line that protects your peace when no one else will. In the end, Amara did not lose her life. She let go of the one that was never truly hers. And in doing so, she found something far more rare, a life that fit her.